In this lesson, we will learn how to use the flatten versus the flatshot command in AutoCAD. Now, the flatten command is something that we covered in lesson number 6, and it is generally quite useful when you have quite a simple spline that is slightly deformed in one direction, and you just want to basically get it all to line up and be planar to better work into your sections. Now, the flatshot command, on the other hand, is much more powerful, but it is a lot more difficult to get to use because it only uses 3D solid objects to work on. So if we took the general method of importing everything in other words, inserting a block, we basically started by looking at how we can use the extracted section. So let's go and click on that and let's just see what the results are and what we can do with it. So you can see that everything comes into place very neatly. We have our, if I look in the perspective view, or at least in an orthographic view, we have everything coming in exactly the way it had been modeled in 3D Max. It's all lining up one behind each other. The one thing I'd like to do right now is just take this section that has been drawn and move it off to the side so that it is out of our way. So I'm going to use the layer isolate tool here. I'm going to isolate all of that, and I'm just going to move that completely out the way, making sure that F8 has been selected so that I can basically move it orthographically across. Now, when it comes to all of these objects, they're going to be a little bit tricky to work with, because if you have a look at them in 3D, they basically are going to require a hidden line view in order to work properly. So for example, all of this, we have a lot of three-dimensional objects that if we use the flatten command, they would basically become all squashed, very much the way we would make something planar in 3D Max. So just to show you as an example so that we can see the differences, let's go and take these columns and move them across, or rather let's make a copy of them, move them across here, and let's have a look at them in the side view, and let's quickly use the flatten command and have a look at what it does. So I'm typing in flatten, I hit enter. I'm not removing any hidden lines, and basically it's now been flattened. Now, if this type of hidden line, or this type of wireframe view rather, is suitable for what you're trying to do, perhaps you're working very quickly and you don't have time to process the models to use a flatshot command, definitely use this method because it is super quick, it doesn't require much energy at all, and the results are generally very, very accurate. So if you do want to use the flatshot command, what happens once you type in flatshot is you get the message saying that there isn't any 3D object. So this is what we read here. There are no solids or surfaces that can be projected. So you're probably asking yourself, how can we get those to be done? And that is exactly what we're going to cover right now. What we're going to do is go back into 3D Max where we had left off at the end of lesson 9, and we're going to have to take all of our objects. Let's just make sure that the objects that we applied the slice to have been converted down to editable poly. Let's just reselect these objects now in 3D Max, and I'm now going to export them slightly differently. I'm going to go and export selected, and I'm going to export this into the reference file folders as an extracted section and SAT file. So you just need to go down. You're not going to see it necessarily. It is, if I just bring this to the top of the screen, you're going to see that your SAT file extension is here at the bottom. So choose that, and then basically you can go and export that type of file. So I'm going to be replacing the one that I had done previously as I was testing this method, just to make sure that it is all fine. And now the export process is happening. It gives me a message to say that it's successfully exported that. And once I go back into AutoCAD, I'm now going to delete all of these objects. And I'm going to now import the new objects, not going through the insert block, but rather file import. And since this process is going to take a few long seconds, I'm going to pause the video, and then we're going to have a look at the objects once they have been imported in. So here are those imported models, and if I zoom out, you'll see that everything is slightly out of scale. Now, if you're working in the exact same scales between all the different software that you use, then you won't have this issue. I generally avoid this issue by bringing things in through the insert block method, but that is not available when I import the model in. And that little issue of scale has been generated because if I go back to unit setup, the system unit setup is centimeters. And if this was meters just the way it is here, then that scale difference would not happen. But anyhow, getting around this is quite simple. All we need to do is just scale this up. So I'm going to just type SC enter. Select those objects, right click, the base point is going to be 0.0.0, and I'm going to then scale that up 10 times. So I'm just going to hang on 1 second while AutoCAD is scaling up that 3D geometry. I'm going to type in 10, hit enter, and that scale is now to the right size, exactly the way it was done in 3D Max. Now you'll notice all of these interesting radial lines. These are basically artifacts coming in through the process through which that SAT file was generated. I'm not going to worry about this because once we use the flatshot command, this is going to go away. So also just to make things a little bit cleaner, I'm just going to remove some of these, or at least freeze some of these layers that we are seeing underneath, so that we have a slightly cleaner workspace to do this on. So the next thing I'm going to do, which is quite important, is I'm going to take all of these 3D objects and I'm just going to move them to basically be placed side by side. I'm going to move them first of all slightly outwards, and then I'm going to start moving them with quite large increments to basically be all neatly spaced out. The first one is going to be 100 meters, and then I'm just going to space each one of them individually. This one is going to be 200, and these two I can do together at 300. And I'm doing this because I basically don't want them to overlap over each other once I use the flatshot command. So you can see that the differences are quite big. It's all basically neatly spaced out at 100-meter increments. And this is going to allow me then to just bring it all back together. So what happens now, once I go into my right view, I'm going to see all of these objects next to each other. I could also space them out slightly tighter, but I'm not that concerned about making that too efficient. Next, I'm going to type in the flatshot command, so FLATSHOT. Enter, and I'm going to choose to insert as a new block. Let's just choose a slightly different color so that we can literally see the difference, and I'm going to click on create. Then I'm going to wait a couple of seconds once this is generated. So I'm going to just hit pause, and I'm going to come back to the video once that is in place. So here we go, that has now been created, and we can see that if we move our mouse around, you can see that it is basically floating around. So it's asking you for an insertion point or a base point. Basically this you have to do in manually. So I'm just going to type in 0.0.0 and hit enter, and then just not use any scale factor, not use any rotation. So these objects now need to be moved manually into place. I'm going to just move them as closely as possible to that original object that they were derived from. I'm going to just use my snaps, and I'm going to snap them into place as closely as I can. So once you're pretty much happy with that placement, you'll see that certain things could be, well, I guess it's pretty much in the correct place. You just need to find the right object to snap it onto. So next you can go and delete your 3D objects. You can now see that even though we had all those artifacts, these objects are quite cleanly made, and I think that is quite successfully executed. So again, with these, you will see that it is a lot better. You'll see that this hidden line is working quite well. We're not necessarily getting these lines because we don't have any edges in those placements, but you will see that you're getting the right geometry, and it's all looking like a good hidden line render. So these objects as well, these 3D objects, have completely become collapsed into just a couple of edges. So all of that now gets deleted, and I'm going to have to explode this and move everything back into place. And you can also just compare the difference between the flatten command giving us this result and the flatshot command giving us this result. So if there are any things missing, for example, if you are missing any of these vertical columns, you can go and fill them in manually. Like I see that this extension is not really there, so I can easily go and do that. Most of what I need is in place, so I'm pretty much happy with what this result is. So let me just go and explode all of this. So X enter, and I'm going to now go back into my top view and move everything back into place. Perhaps doing it in the front view or the side view or right view would be a little bit more appropriate. Move, and I'm going to move everything across by 100, and everything's going to now go back into place the way it was originally. So I'm going to do that in my own time, and we're going to start off the next lesson with all of these 2D objects back in place, and then we're going to have a look at how we can align and compose and relayer all of these objects, and we're going to handle that in the next lesson. The main thing that I wanted to touch on is the difference between the flatten and flatshot command and how the two have their advantages and disadvantages.